Are you buying your first house? Well, stick around. Today, we're going to talk about it on Suits and Boots Legal Talk. Well, hey guys, we're here again, and I'm back with Matt Madison from Madison Company Real Estate. So, Matt, thanks for joining us, man.
Well, it's good to be with you, Luke.
I'm Luke Martin, one of the attorneys at Benbow, Davidson, and Martin. So we're just happy to be here today. I got to give you a little bit of a heads up. This is Matt's performance on like 45 minutes notice. So we had lunch together today, and I'm like, "Hey, man, you want to do a podcast?" And he's like, "Sure." I said, "Are you sure?" I mean, I know you just came right along. What a sport.
Well, I tell you, whenever you get an opportunity, you have to take it sometimes.
Especially an opportunity to talk to me, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Even though I had an hour lunch with you, I still wanted to come.
It just wasn't enough time. Well, so it was me and you and a few other guys. And so I guess, is it okay if we talk about what we're doing on Wednesdays?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we, when was it? April, we figured out?
I guess it was April, yeah.
I think it was like April 16th or something.
Yeah.
So Matt calls and says, "Hey, you want to go to lunch?" And I said, "Sure." So Colin was in the office. You guys know Colin. He's been on here several times. I said, "Colin, you want to go to lunch? I'm going to go meet Matt at Coach's." And he said, "Sure, that sounds great." And he looks over at Scott and says, "Scott, you want to go with us? We're going to Coach." So the three of us all get in the car and drive over there. I didn't know that you had invited Paul Cook.
Right.
And so Paul comes along, and he's there. And then a friend of ours, or one of our office staff, her husband comes in, and we're like, "Hey, have us." So it ends up being like 6 or 7 people there for lunch that day. And it was great. We just had a great time. And since then, we've been meeting every Wednesday at lunch with just a group of guys, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's been really cool. We've started, we're all believers, and so we've all kind of we do share a Bible story or just something that's been on our minds for that week, and it's been real encouraging. So you've kind of been the spearhead for that, so thank you.
Well, absolutely. I feel like it's important to have fellowship with other men.
Yeah. Well, so I think last time we talked, how long have you been in the real estate business?
So I always go back to when I got married, because I got married and went into real estate in the same year. Okay. So I'll be married 29 years. 29 years. This December. So you have seen one or two first-time home buyers, I'm sure, in 29 years. A couple. Yeah. Couple. Yeah.
So if you're a first-time home buyer watching this today, we kind of wanted to gear this toward you and just kind of talk about tips, things that, if you've bought 3 or 4 houses, it's probably old hat. Of course, in this day and age, it seems like the laws are changing. Ever since 2007, 2008, the laws change maybe every 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And I know the contract changes. The standard form contracts that we use change very regularly. I think a new one just came out this year.
Correct.
And so it seems like it's always evolving, always changing. So if you haven't bought a house in a few years, this might be helpful for you too. But so first-time home buyers, what are some tips, some things that you think would be good for first-time home buyers to think about? Maybe if they're thinking about buying a house a few years from now, or maybe thinking about buying a house tomorrow.
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to realize that your reoccurring debt matters. A lot of people don't understand how much it costs them. A lot of people will go out and they'll think, well, I need to get a car so I can build my credit. And they'll sign on for a 5-year car loan for $400 or $500 a month. They don't realize at that point, basically, that's costing them about $40,000 to $50,000 worth of purchasing power.
Wow.
And instead of doing that, maybe they could get a car that's less expensive, something they can afford to possibly pay cash for, and work on building their credit other ways.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at it and you want to possibly buy a house in the next year, you really need to be taking a strong look at what your debt situation is. Because
and one of the things that you're going to want them to do as their agent is to get pre-qualified, right?
Right. A lot of people, they would just want to go look at houses. They're like, well, this is what I want. Well, that's fine and everything, but the last thing I want to do is set you up for expecting something that you can't actually be able to purchase. So that's very important, is set your expectations ahead of time, and getting a pre-qual letter is one of the most important things they can do.
Talk a little bit about that pre-qual letter. What do you mean? What are we talking about when we say that?
Yeah, so what they would need to do is talk to someone in the lending field, and then they'll go over all the items they need, such as pay stubs, bank statements, different things like that, to show, okay, this is a snapshot of what your financial picture looks like. And then what they can do, a lot of times lenders can put them on a 6-month plan to say, okay, here's the things you need to pay down, here's what you need to do, so that in 6 months we can come back and reassess where you are. So
the lender can help them give them advice to kind of get in a better financial situation to qualify for that loan.
Absolutely. If they're not in that situation yet, they can give them some counsel, especially those that have been in the business a while.
I see, that's fascinating, because this is all part of the real estate process that I rarely get to see, because by the time it comes to me, there's already a deal, there's a contract signed.
Right.
So I sometimes I might get involved before the contract signed if I'm reviewing some language or reviewing some restrictions or zoning or something like that. But most of the time it's after the fact. Definitely, I'm almost never involved when it's in the pre-qualification stage. So that's really neat to know. One of the things that I've read and heard people talk about is getting all those documents in order. So having your tax returns from the previous years, having pay stubs, having your debt information statements and all that stuff. Just going ahead and getting all that together, because those are things that lender's going to need, right?
Right. And the thing about it is, too, when you look at it, I mean, you want to be prepared. And the way that you get prepared is doing things in order. Right. You can't get the cart in front of the horse. You have got to start out with that pre-qual letter, because that'll tell you, hey, whether it's right now or in 6 months, this is what I can expect. Yeah. And then at that point, then you can go out and you can look at homes in the price range that you're qualified for, instead of looking at something that might be a little more expensive than what you can do.
So that's good, because that's kind of one of the places where I wanted to go was the budget. Because you got to set a budget for how much are we going to spend, and and so that pre-qual letter really sets that budget, right?
It does absolutely. And rates are a big deal. We were talking earlier before we got on the podcast. There's some anticipation that the Fed may cut rates.
There's rumblings. There
is, but there have been for about the past year. Yeah. So.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year, I remember hearing they're going to cut rates 6 times this year. It's going to be the most ever, and it's not. And
they haven't done that.
Yeah.
But we'll see how what it looks like. I just hope it's not revolving around November the 5th.
Yeah.
I hope that they at least show some signs that they're doing it based on not a political agenda,
but market indicators.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've thought about, because we see so many transactions, it's so rare anymore to see houses under that $200,000 price point. Most of the decent properties are $200,000 and up. When Jessica and I now. Hey, I'm old. It's been 20 years since we bought our first house, almost 20 years ago.
Right.
And it was a foreclosure, and it was a Jim Walter home, so it was kind of like a tract house style, but it was out in the country on its own. A foreclosure on, I think it was on 1.5 acres or 2 acres, I don't remember. And we paid $60,000 for it. It was a little vinyl sided house. It was like 1,000 square feet or something. It was super small, but I mean, perfect for us starting out.
Right.
But even back then, we were looking at houses for first-time home buyers in the 100 to 150,000 range was pretty easy to find. We were looking at a lot of houses for 105, 110, 115. It's just not around anymore, is it?
It's not. And you think about what's happened just with the price of everything in the last few years, right? And building supplies are at the top of that.
Yeah.
And so if you have that, you've got homes that have been built or are being built, and they're there's not as much margin unless you raise the price. And so we're seeing a lot of that in our market now.
We've talked a little bit at lunch on on Wednesdays about so with the market being as high as it is, and salaries and pay really hasn't gone with the inflation. So your salary, you're probably not making as much now as you would have been 4 or 5 years ago in relationship to the inflation of the market. So one of the things that's important there is that high interest rate, that high payment. And we've talked about, instead of asking sellers to reduce the price, asking sellers to give money toward buying down the rate.
That's correct.
And talk a little bit about that process and what that looks like.
Yeah. So if let's just use simple math. So $300,000.
Sure.
So you say I went and showed you a home for $300,000. You're like, Matt, we want to make an offer, and so we do. And you say, I want to offer $290,000, and I say, well, okay, well, let's look at offering $300,000 and have the seller buy down that rate for use that $10,000 to buy down that rate. I was looking at an example of that. I think it was around $300,000, and if you got it for $290,000 versus $300,000. The first option, you would save about $76 a month. But if you got that rate bought down, you would save $240 some dollars.
That's incredible.
That's incredible. And you look at that over the course, and everybody takes that number and multiplies it by 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And says, okay, this is how much money I'm going to save. Well, the majority of the time, people are only in their home 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So you've got to kind of be more realistic than that. But just think about that savings. I mean, it went from, it basically more than tripled.
Yeah.
Just because of that idea.
Yeah.
And sellers are getting the same thing, right?
Yep. Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But you're getting a break on the interest rate.
If they were willing to take $290,000, what do they care if they're going to spend that $10,000's going to go to buy down the rate? So that kind of leads into the second part of this. I think if for a first-time home buyer, especially, I've been so blessed in my life because I've been involved in heating and air and plumbing and electrical. And you guys have all heard kind of my backstory. So I know people who are in those trades. And when we go look at a house, we sort of know what we're looking at. But if your background is not in that and you're going to look at a house, you really need some help and somebody that can give you some guidance. And that's where a good broker comes in, right?
Right.
Like somebody like you that can say, hey, we could offer $290,000. But here's this other option. There's a lot of good things. What are some things they need to look for when they're trying to find a good broker to show them properties, other than someone that works for Madison Co?
Well, I think it's important whenever you're talking to a broker about helping you look for a house is to just kind of find out, number one, okay, what's your experience, And I'm not saying everybody that's been in the business for 5 years, you don't want to use them. But I'm just saying people that have been in any occupation longer tend to have a little more knowledge about what it is they're doing on a daily basis. But there are a lot of great agents coming into the market now, and even when I was starting back in 95, I remember every time I turned around, I felt like there was another agent. But it's really increased a lot. But I think you're going to see more and more people probably getting out of the business just as things kind of a little more difficult to sell homes in this market. But from a standpoint of what should they be looking for, they need to be asking some questions like what are some other vendors and that sort of thing that you can help me kind of with the process. Like you should have somebody that can do a termite inspection. You should be able to walk through a house as a realtor and be able to look at some things and have some things be pretty obvious. Now, a seller, whenever they go to sell a house, are going to have a property disclosure, which basically lays out what they know about the property. So that's also a good indication of if there's any glaring, obvious things that you need to look for.
Sure.
You know?
And one thing folks may not realize, I just kind of went through this with a lady who came into the office this morning for a consult, is that contract, the standard contract says it's a due diligence contract, meaning that when the buyer goes under contract, they need to look at every aspect of that property before they buy it. If there's some stone that they leave unturned and they go to closing, the contract literally says closing by the buyer is acceptance of the property in its then existing condition, meaning you got
Correct.
it. Whether it's a lemon or whether it's lemonade, you got it, right? So that due diligence process is really important. And you mentioned those vendors, things like home inspections and termite inspections and those kind of things. Talk about that process just a little bit and what you as an agent encourage your people to do.
Yeah, so a termite inspection is critical to the structure, foundation of the house and stuff like that. So I always recommend that. And it's interesting to me, a lot of times lenders don't even require them.
A lot of times they don't.
A lot of times they don't.
Yeah.
And I think you can get one, I can get one done for $75 or $100, which is crazy to think you're getting ready to invest several $1,000s into an asset and you don't know what the condition of it is, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another thing too. Whenever I have a home that I'm selling like out in the country and I know that it's on a septic tank, I always recommend you get that done first.
A septic inspection.
A septic inspection.
Yeah.
And the reason that is because what I've found in my career is that I'll go and I'll order a termite inspection, a home inspection, and a septic inspection, and I'll do all those on the same day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do I do that? Well, I've changed some things up. Now I order the septic inspection first.
Okay.
And the reason that I do that first is because a lot of times there'll be something that is more major on the septic inspection than there is on the home inspection. The buyer hasn't spent the $450 on the home inspection yet.
Sure.
Until they can get the septic inspection handled. Septic may come back great, but I tell you, I would say 7 times out of 10, there's something going on with that septic tank. And why is that? Because people don't even think about it.
It's in the
right?
ground.
Yeah, exactly. It's doing its job.
Out of
if I
sight.
flush and it's gone, then I'm good. And you just can't. I mean, you've got to look at that if you're going in that due diligence period. That would be the first inspection I would order. Period.
And there's a lot of homes in Iredell County, northern Iredell County, Alexander County, where I live. A lot of homes are on septic systems.
Right.
Do you think most of the homes, probably, because unless they're in the city, they're not going to have city sewer. So a lot of those homes are going to be on septic systems. So that's,
absolutely.
Which also, you got a well at that point is also. So you need to do well inspections and water, maybe some water tests or something like that.
And a lot of times on septic inspections, they'll have some deterioration that's taken place because people haven't had it properly serviced, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But those are some things that you can take care of initially and say, okay, they're going to handle that and then move on to your home inspection. But what if you get a repair on a septic, which I've had this happen before, that's like the tank's cracked? Oof. That's a $3,200 to $4,000 repair that you need to know up front if that's going to be an issue, because if not, then what does the missing outlet in the kitchen really matter?
Right.
On the home inspection. Anyway, that's just some things that a few things that I've learned over the course of my career.
So far we've talked about pre-qual letters. We've talked about how to get that rate down, selecting a good real estate broker, getting through that due diligence process, doing the home inspection. What other tips? Is there anything else that we've left out that first-time home buyers need to be thinking about?
Well, I think it's important to have a knowledgeable attorney in the area that can help with your title work and any issues that come up in the transaction. So that's all a part of the the closing package.
It's kind of building this team around the deal, right?
Right.
When we talk about, we see this a lot in commercial real estate where you've got your deal team and, there's an accountant, there's an attorney, there's all these different professionals, the lender, and the lender oftentimes has an attorney, all these different professionals kind of gathering around to take care of this client to make sure that process goes smoothly. And that's kind of what the real estate broker does. And
Right.
that you've got relationships with all these people like, hey, yeah, the paint in that room doesn't look so good, but I got a painter. He can come out, take a look at it, and tell us how much that'll take
Right.
to fix. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so you've spent 29 years now building those relationships.
Right.
And other agents that we work with have similar stories. You know, they've spent time building those relationships. It's just important to have those really experienced people around you. I remember when I first started doing this job, Mr. Bimbo always said, well, you want a young doctor and an old lawyer. And I thought, wait a minute now. You know, I passed the bar. I know what I'm doing. But now that I've got about a decade of experience, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, you kind of want a more experienced lawyer. You know?
Right. Yeah.
But a lot of the younger agents that we work with do a really good job.
Right.
We've got a lot of agents who reach out directly to me, and you know we do everything we can to help them. So even with some of the younger agents, I know there's a guy that just started up here in town, and he called me before he ever listed his first house, and he said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to list a house. You were recommended. Would it be okay if I just call you when I have questions?" And I said, "Absolutely. Let me know how I can help." Because that's how we make our living. We help people,
Right.
And we especially like to build relationships with good agents like you,
Yeah.
and just make sure that deal goes smoothly. Because there's so many things that can go haywire in the middle of it.
Oh yeah,
It's
and I mean, and you know this because you helped me with my home, right?
Yeah.
And you can get down to the closing, and
That's
things
right.
and
That's
things
right.
go south.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it's just good to have somebody that's got their head on and that everything's, you know, they're
Yeah.
calm and cool, and we walked through it, and we made it through. But it's vital to have an attorney in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so-
get that team around you. So find these people that you can trust.
Yeah.
Get them around you and go get this thing. Because it's not, you know, even when you buy the house. So, and that's, you know, there's a whole nother podcast on the expenses and the things to look for after the purchase. Because even on brand new houses, there's going to be little things that come
Right.
up. My wife and I just built our house a couple of years ago, right in the middle of the pandemic. And there's already like places in the sheetrock that are cracked, and you know there's a door. We've got one of those barn doors that it'll sometimes it'll stay shut, and then other times it just kind of creeps open. And unfortunately, it's on our bathroom, so it's like, oh, get in. But you know,
they have door stops, barn door stops for those.
we need that. We need that. I thought about, because it's got metal, I thought about just putting a magnet up there. And it's
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know. Well, Matt, thanks so much for spending some time with us today,
Yeah,
man.
man.
And just off the cuff like that's if we had an audience, I would say, y'all give him a hand. Yeah, listen to your adoring public.
Yeah, sometimes off the cuff is the best way to do it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Well, guys, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our content. We're posting new stuff every week so that you guys can be informed on any amount of things that we take care of at the law firm. And we have all kinds of guests on here who are really interesting. So thanks so much for coming. Thanks for watching, guys.
The information contained in this video and audio recording is general in nature and should not be relied upon in making legal decisions. Every situation is different, and you should consult with your attorney before making any legal decisions.